A Roman coffin sat locked shut for 1700 years. A cave remained sealed since Neanderthals walked the earth. Tombs full of ancient mummies, hidden chambers underneath castles, and busy shopping malls. These are 10 sealed rooms that took decades to open. Just recently in Budapest, archaeologists dug up a Roman coffin that nobody had opened in 1700 years. It was found in an old burial ground mixed in with ruins of abandoned houses. The thing that immediately got everyone's attention was that the lid was still sealed, held down with molten lead and metal clamps. Nobody had broken in, nobody had touched it. Lead archaeologist Gabriela Fenya said it was completely intact, and when they finally opened it, inside was a full skeleton. A bunch of coins, 140 of them to be exact, 2 glass vessels, and some bronze figures. Then they found a bone hairpin, amber jewelry, and fabric woven with gold thread, which told them it was a young woman. Her family had packed the coffin with all of it to send her off with. Fenya said that she was genuinely moved by it. You could feel how much the people who buried her cared about her. She also said even now, it makes her shudder thinking about how painful it must have been for the family burying this young woman. The coffin was custom built just for her, which apparently wasn't common at the time. People usually just reused old ones. And they're not done yet. There's a layer of mud sitting at the bottom of the coffin that hasn't been gone through. Fenius is hoping jewelry is buried in it because so far they haven't found any earrings or anything like that. In September 2021, archaeologists from the Gibraltar National Museum, led by Professor Clive Finlayson, were exploring Gorham's cave in Gibraltar. They found a chamber that had been completely blocked off by sand for about 40,000 years. Neanderthals died out roughly 40,000 years ago, so whatever was in there had been sitting untouched since they were alive. They squeezed through into it and found a space about 43 feet long with stalactites on the ceiling. On the floor were bones from lynx, hyenas, and vultures. There was also a big sea snail shell in there that somebody had carried in from the coast, and at that point in history, the only somebody around was Neanderthals. The cave already had a ton of stuff tied to Neanderthals as well, a carving that might be some of the earliest art ever made, signs they were hunting seals, signs they were pulling feathers off birds. It looks like they were wearing them. The kid's tooth was even found nearby, though it seems hyenas dragged that one in. Clive Finlayson said that since the sand blocking the chamber was already 40,000 years old, the chamber itself is even older than that, so it had to have been Neanderthals using it. In 2023, in Naples, Italy, archaeologists opened up a 2,000-year-old tomb and found perfectly preserved mummies. The tomb is called the Tomb of Cerabus, named after the massive mural painted at the entrance of the 3-headed dog from Greek mythology, said to guard the underworld. It was found when the team noticed a wall built with an old Roman construction technique, which turned out to be the front of the tomb, sealed shut with a thick slab of rock. Before they even went in, they fed a small camera through a tiny opening to see what was inside. Found was described as unprecedented. The bodies had been covered in a cream made from wormwood and a herb called the goosefoot, and the shroud wrapping one of the bodies had hardened and mineralized from the temperature inside the chamber. The walls and ceiling were covered in frescoes, still in really good condition. When they unwrapped one of the bodies, it was pretty intact based on the items buried alongside him and the care taken with that body. Researchers believed he was the head of the family that the tomb was built for. The remains had been smothered in those plant-based creams before the chamber was sealed, which they think is a big reason the body survived for 2,000 years. On November 8th, 2024, the ground at All Saints Church in Martock, England just opened up. This massive hole appeared in the churchyard, and sitting underneath it was a family vault that had been sealed for 300 years. What caved in was something called a box tomb, also known as a false crypt. It sits above ground, looks like a big stone structure, but doesn't actually hold any remains. It's basically, as Reverend Paul Fillory put it, a very grand gravestone. Over time, the ceiling of the vault underneath got weaker and the weight of that stone box eventually became too much. The vault had shelves along the walls holding each family member's coffin. Inside were the remains of Reverend Charles Lewis, a church leader who died in the mid-1700s, his wife, 5 other adult members of the Lewis family. In 2018, construction workers in Alexandria, Egypt were digging the foundation for a new apartment building when they hit something about 16 feet underground. It was a massive black granite coffin that hadn't been opened opened since it was buried over 2,000 years ago. The thing was enormous, about the size of a small car, weighing somewhere between 27 and 30 tons, the biggest one ever found in Alexandria, and the lid was still sealed shut. The internet kinda lost its mind. Alexander the Great founded Alexandria. His tomb has never been found, and here's this giant sealed coffin sitting under the city. They finally lifted the lid. Millions of people were watching. Inside were 3 skeletons, and the coffin was also filled with this brownish red liquid, basically hundreds and hundreds of years of sewage and groundwater that had slowly seeped in. Not exactly the treasure people were hoping for, but one of the skulls had what looked like damage from an arrow wound, so some researchers think the 3 might have been soldiers, but nobody figured out exactly who they were. About 43 miles northwest of Rome, there's a site called San Giuliano where archaeologists spent years digging through a massive burial ground, over 600 tombs carved directly into the rock. Looters had gotten into basically every single one of them. Some were picked clean as far back as when the Romans took over the region around the late 200s BCE. Then in 2024, they found one with an entrance slab that had never been moved. Davide Zori, the lead archaeologist on the project, lifted it, and inside 4 skeletons, lying on their stone beds exactly where they'd been placed 2,600 years ago. More than 100 objects were still sitting around them too, ceramics and weapons and bronze ornaments. Nobody had touched any of it. It was pretty incredible, because when a tomb gets looted, you just lose all the context. You don't know which objects belong to which person or how everything was arranged. Here, nothing had been moved. In 2024, construction workers were doing renovation work on the Smithsonian Castle in Washington, D.C., its first major renovation in about 50 years. They found a hidden chamber under the street right outside it. It was a brick cistern, basically a big round well built in 1847 to collect rainwater. 9 feet across, 30 feet deep, completely sealed for over 120 years. When they opened it up, it was empty and dry. The National Park Service posted about it and made sure to get ahead of the obvious jokes. Sadly, no national treasures or secret symbols were recovered, they wrote. DC has no shortage of underground conspiracy theories, especially around the National Mall. People have claimed for years that there's a whole hidden labyrinth of secret Smithsonian archives buried under there. There are a few actual staff tunnels connecting some of the buildings, but nothing mysterious, at least so they say. Apparently though, this was just an old rainwater tank that got sealed up and forgotten about sometime in the 1800s. Not the most dramatic find on the list, but there is still something kind of fun about the fact that right next to such a busy place, right in the United States, something can sit underground for over a century without anyone knowing. It's there. In western Ukraine, there's a medieval castle that dates back to the 12th century. It started as a wooden fort on a cliff above a river, got rebuilt in stone, redesigned in the early 1600s, and then in 1676, the Ottomans showed up and started shelling it with cannons. Part of the castle got destroyed, obviously, a tower collapsed, and somewhere under all that rubble, a room got completely sealed off, and it stayed that way for about 300 years. 2023, archaeologists noticed a ventilation shaft buried under the ruins of that collapsed tower, which told them something was down there. Problem was getting to it without wrecking everything. No machinery could be used, so the team spent over a year moving debris entirely by hand. When they finally got in, the room was dark. The walls were covered in soot. Based on the layout, the ventilation shaft, they think it was probably a fortified room built into the walls of the castle where soldiers could fire weapons from. But then they found something that opened things up a bit more. A small gap in one of those stone walls that might be the entrance to a tunnel. There are old legends about a whole underground network running beneath the castle and out into the surrounding area. They're still digging. Nothing's confirmed yet, but if the tunnel leads somewhere, this might just be the beginning. In July 2025, archaeologists digging underneath an ice cream shop in Poland found a medieval tomb that had been sitting there since the 13th century. They were excavating when they hit a large limestone slab with a carving on it. The carving showed a man standing in full chainmail armor holding a sword and a shield. They lifted the slab and found a male skeleton. No objects were buried with him, just the body. The tombstone was made from limestone imported from Sweden though, so that kind of told them this wasn't an ordinary person. Archaeologist Sylvia Kurczenka said carvings like this, ones that actually show the face and figure of the person buried were really rare in medieval Poland. Only a handful like it exist. Everything points to him being a knight, or at the very least some high-level military role. Researchers are now doing DNA analysis on the bones, planning a full facial reconstruction from the skull, so at some point we might actually get to see what the guy looked like. In late 2022, in a small hilltop town in Tuscany, archaeologists were digging through an ancient Roman bathhouse. They found something nobody expected. Underneath massive stone slabs and layers of mud were pools that had been completely sealed off since the 5th century. They broke through and drained the mud. Sitting at the bottom were over 20 life-sized bronze statues, gods, heroes, Roman emperors, along with 5,000 gold, silver, and bronze coins. The mud was warm and had no oxygen in it, which meant nothing had decayed. The statues looked basically brand new. Researchers called it the most important Mediterranean discovery in about 50 years. But what makes it extra interesting is the story of how it got sealed in the first place, because this wasn't looters hiding stolen goods. It was not a natural disaster burying everything either. When Christianity took over the Roman Empire, the people in this town didn't smash their old statues, throw them out. Instead, they held what looked like a very respectful burial ritual, placing the statues gently into the water before layering thousands of coins over them, then sealing the whole thing shut with giant stone slabs. They were basically saying goodbye to their old gods. And that has been the video. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.